What are you advising your fellow Democrats? What needs to be done here?
First of all, we can talk about border security and still be respectful of the immigrants' rights. And what we need to do is we certainly have to look at funding for border security, whether it's money for Border Patrol, technology, making sure that we address the issues of the folks who are coming in. And of course, at the same time, the drugs are coming in through our ports of entry. Now, once we talk about policy changes and let's say asylum changes, I think we can have a calibration on that, but we just have to be very careful as to what changes we make.
Well, I'd love to get into that with you, Congressman. You're one of the only Democrats I've ever heard come on the air here to call for changes in asylum law. And that was a much less popular idea, I think, the last time we talked about it. So how close are we here and what needs to actually be changed? Republicans have been calling, for a return to the Remain in Mexico policy, for instance. Is that where you start?
Well, there's different ways we can do this. I think one of the reasons Democrats were against stay in Mexico was simply because they felt that having the migrants wait over there was too dangerous. But look, you can always work with the UN High Commission of Refugees, where they have been at very tough places across the world. They can be involved. They can provide the security while we process them. So, yeah, we can have a safe stay in Mexico process because, again, look, if you got 8,000 people that are trying to cross a day, but you can only process 500 of them, what happens to the other 7,500 people? They're just put on an honor system and they're sent off into the interior. And at the end of the day, once they go before an immigration judge at the end of 4 or 5 years, you're going to find out that most of them don't qualify under the persecution by a state based on the 5 reasons why you're allowed under asylum. Most of them are coming in for economic reasons. And as you know, economic reasons doesn't provide you an asylum relief.
So, Congressman, obviously a lot of these issues are very difficult, and they've proven difficult for Congress to address for years, if not decades now. What do you think is a realistic timeline for compromise here? There's been suggestions that this is not something that happens in 2023.
Well, I think there's going to be an attempt. I can say that on the House side, I've attempted to talk to some of my Republican colleagues, but it's so extreme right now. They want to have this thing and this thing without compromising. It looks like the Senate, at least a small group of them, are talking about compromise. And if we're going to reach a point, there's got to be a little give and take. It won't be extremely to the left or extremely to the right, but it's got to be at least some sort of incremental steps if there are some policy changes, But do we need to put funding? Absolutely. Hire more Border Patrol, hire more support staff, technology. We need to make sure we do that. Border wall is a 14th century solution. It doesn't work. I can send you a heat map that shows you that most of the activity of asylum seekers is where there's a fence because, for example, in the state of Texas, the middle of the river is the international boundary. We don't have a fence there. We certainly don't have a fence by the riverbank. They're usually a quarter mile or a mile away. That doesn't stop anybody.
Well, of course, you know this firsthand. Your 28th congressional district sits on the border, Congressman. Is the White House in touch with you? Have you heard from President Biden for advice on the way forward here?
I have talked more to Homeland because, as you know, I'm the ranking member for Homeland Appropriations. So we have been talking with Homeland as to some ideas. It comes down to 2 basic concepts. I mean, there's a lot of things. You got to have repercussions at the border, which means that if somebody doesn't qualify, you quickly deport them after we see that they don't qualify. Number 1, consequences at the border. And the second thing, which is something that it's been hard to convince a lot of Democrats and Republicans, is why are we playing defense on the 1-yard line? By the time somebody gets to the border, it's a little bit too late. Can we play defense or can we do more of the Homeland Security process management outside the U.S. border? Work with Guatemala, work with Panama, work with the countries that work with us, give a little bit more authority to Homeland to do their work instead of doing this at the U.S. border, which sometimes it's a little bit too late.
And Congressman, while these border issues are worked on in the House, there is another matter that is going to have to be dealt with perhaps more immediately within the next 48 hours, an expulsion resolution vote when it comes to Republican Congressman from New York, George Santos. Sir, how are you planning on voting, and how many do you think are with you?
Well, again, I'm going to look at it, but I think after the Ethics Committee's report, I think that's a pretty darn tough situation for the representative. So we're going to go ahead and wait for the arguments, but I think most of us know what we're going to be looking at, especially after the Ethics Committee report.
Why be so careful, Congressman? Why not vote to expel and take that seat back for Democrats? You've got such a thin majority for Republicans right now. Wouldn't that be the best business for your party?
Well, that's the political position. But again, when somebody comes before the House for a vote, you got to give them all due diligence, and we'll try to give him all the due diligence. We'll certainly be looking at that report, which I've seen some of the highlights. So, again, politically, yeah, you're right. But again, to do our due diligence as members of Congress, let them have that day in court, if I can say that, and then we'll take that vote. And we'll win. Yes, and we'll win that House back, that seat back again.
Have you heard any indication, Congressman, that Santos might resign before you even have the chance to vote on this?
I think only what we've been hearing from the news outlet. He seems to be pretty straightforward on what he wants. He wants to be, I don't think he wants to resign. Let me put it that way, from what I understand.